When Mikhail Gorbachev took control of the USSR in 1985, he took control of a union that was suffering both economically and politically. The past 2 decades had seen a steady fall in factory production, and every proposed economic reform had failed. Gorbachev promised to fix the union by introducing new reforms that would give more freedom to his citizens. In 1987, he introduced elements of democracy into the government, such as multi-candidate elections, although all candidates were still members of the Communist Party. In 1988, Gorbachev implemented the policy of glasnost, providing a greater freedom of speech to citizens and the media. Also in 1988, he established perestroika, adding capitalist ideas such as private businesses into the economy. These 2 ideas were first introduced in a speech Gorbachev gave in 1986 and were part of his goal to democratize the Soviet government. Aside from internal struggles, Gorbachev also had to worry about the opinion of the rest of the world. Back in 1979, the USSR had supported a coup in Afghanistan and sent soldiers over to help protect the new communist government against insurgents. Opposition of the new government proved to be much greater than anticipated, and the USSR still had troops in Afghanistan 9 years later. In 1987, Gorbachev announced plans to withdraw troops, and by 1989, all Soviet troops were removed from Afghanistan. This conflict was sometimes referred to as the Soviets-Vietnam War due to its length and the Soviets' loss of the war. This loss was a major blow to the world's view of the USSR and is considered a major factor of its later dissolution. In 1988, Gorbachev announced the end of the Brezhnev Doctrine, which would allow Soviet satellite states to make government decisions for themselves. This led directly to the revolutions of 1989, during which many satellite states fought to abolish communism using mass, non-violent protests. Poland was the first to remove communism after an open election took place and not a single communist was elected for parliament or prime minister. Soon after came reforms in Hungary's government to create a democracy, followed by Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Bulgaria, and Romania. Of these countries, the only one that utilized violence was Romania. After Hungary removed their communist government, work began to dismantle the fence on their border with Austria. This was a major blow against the Iron Curtain between Eastern and Western Europe, and between East and West Germany. 1 month after the fence was removed, over 13,000 East German citizens had escaped into Austria. Soon after, the East German government banned all travel to Hungary, but by then Czechoslovakia had removed their barrier with Western Europe and East Germans flocked there to escape. The East German government did nothing to prevent travel to Czechoslovakia until the number of refugees grew too great for either country to handle. Because of this, it was decided on November 9th to allow direct travel between East and West Germany, including in Berlin. Thousands of Germans gathered at the wall as the checkpoints were opened, allowing free passage for the first time in nearly 30 years. Over the next few weeks, the wall was systematically torn apart and, on October 3, 1990, Germany was officially reunified. Despite Gorbachev's best efforts, the economy was steadily growing worse, and food shortages were increasingly common. On top of this, many satellite nations were utilizing his lax policies to stage violent protests for their independence. In response, Gorbachev began work on a new union treaty that would further democratize the union, giving more power to each country's government. This was opposed by pro-communist government officials, and in August of 1991, a coup was launched to prevent the signing of the treaty. While the coup ended up failing, Gorbachev lost popular support to his political opponent Boris Yeltsin, who supported the dissolution of the USSR. Between August and December, 10 satellite nations announced their independence. On December 1, 1991, Ukraine announced its independence, which was a major blow to the Union, as Ukraine's power was second only to Russia's, and at this point, most people considered the dissolution of the USSR inevitable. On December 12th, the Balaveja Accords were ratified by the Russian government, establishing a new, looser association known as the Commonwealth of Independent States, or CIS. On December 21st, 11 out of the 12 former Soviet republics signed the Alma-Ata Protocol, confirming the dissolution of the Union and the creation of CIS. On December 25th, Gorbachev formally announced the termination of his position as leader of the Soviet Union and passed over all of his authority to Yeltsin. That night, the Soviet flag was lowered from its place over the Kremlin for the last time, and the Russian tricolor took its place, symbolizing the end of the Soviet Union.